Before we get started with today's interview, just a quick reminder, click the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and ding the bell so that you don't miss any of the great interviews that we have coming up. Now, on to today's interview. Welcome back, everybody. Today, my special guest is music educator and Piano Safari co-author, Dr. Julie Hague. Welcome, Julie. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It is just great to have you here. And I'd like to start off today by getting to know you just a little bit as a composer and a musician. So tell me about some of your formative years in music. Did you come from a musical family?
No, actually. Well, my dad always sang in church choir. But other than that, nope. I grew up in Connecticut in a very small town in a very old house. And there was a piano in it. An old antique upright piano where during the summer, the middle E would stick. So I got very good at playing and lifting back up the E and then going on. And the ivory was all chipped, but my parents said, well, someone needs to play the piano. So how about you? So that's how I started.
Wow. So you had that instrument available to you and you just sort of became the player by default. Very good. Yeah. Tell me about some of your earliest lessons.
I started with a nice lady who lived in town, and then switched to a different teacher a few years later. And then we moved to California when I was 10, which was quite a culture shock. And then I studied with the organist at my church there. And then later on switched to a teacher at a local community college who helped prepare me for college. And then I went to the University of Puget Sound and majored in piano performance. And then went on after that I took 4 years off and started teaching at that point and discovered I really love teaching, especially young children. So that's been part of my life ever since. And I went on to the University of Illinois to study piano performance and pedagogy. Because actually one of my teachers from when I was a child in Connecticut, I kept in contact with her. And one day when I was in college, she sent me in the mail a brochure about piano pedagogy and said, I saw this and thought about you. And I had never heard of piano pedagogy before, but that really changed my career a lot. And that's the trajectory that I started going into, more teaching and then writing Piano Safari. Because when I went to do my doctorate at Oklahoma, I met my co-author, Catherine Fisher, there in pedagogy class. So then we started writing that, and it's just built since then.
Wow. I want to rewind for just a moment. Mm-hmm. What was the moment at which you decided and felt like this isn't just something I do as a hobby when I'm a little kid. This is going to be my career. This is my life's passion.
I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a pianist of some sort. There was a traveling pianist who played at different churches. He played like concert arrangements of hymns, and he would come to our church every once in a while, and I wanted to be like him. So I wanted to be a concert pianist. But then I veered into more accompanying, which I love doing, and then also teaching later on.
What a cool inspiration that you had a role model to kind of look up to and say, oh, I see what I could be now, and I could see what you could do with these skills. That is so cool. And talk to us a little bit about meeting Catherine Fisher and the inspiration for Piano Safari.
Yeah, so we met in class, and she, during class one day, just said, I've always wanted to write a piano method. And I realized, me too. And so we got together and we realized that a lot of our ideas were very similar. And the University of Oklahoma has a wonderful pedagogy library with all the books you can imagine. So we hung out in there a lot and looked at a lot of the old methods and just lots of music. And so we started sketching out our ideas right there at school.
Very cool. Now, prior to creating the Piano Safari book, had you done composing?
No. In fact, I see a lot of my students now love to improvise and compose on their own. They just do it at home and then come in and say, hey, I wrote this piece. And growing up, I'm a very type A person, so I never did that. It never even crossed my mind to doodle around at the piano. I'm a really good sight reader, And so I just like to read the notes. And I thought, well, Beethoven can write it better, so why should I even try? And then in college, I had some assignments with composition, and I'm like, in theory class, and I'm like, why are we doing this? I'll never have to do this in my life. So then when we started writing Piano Safari, we thought about using some outside composers, but then realized it was easiest just for us to be like, we need this specific piece with these parameters. We can just write it ourselves. So that's how it started. So basically my composing all comes out of what my students need or what a book we're writing on needs.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So after you and Catherine kind of decided what was needed for each part of the Piano Safari curriculum, was there a period in which you were testing these pieces with students and finding out what worked and what didn't work, and then going back and making changes? Talk to me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, we try to test the pieces as much as we can with as many kids as we are teaching right then that are at that level, so we can get an idea of what kids like and what would work well.
So what inspires new compositions for you?
So the ones that are on the Federation list are in the Piano Safari Repertoire Book 3. And so we were trying to combine some classical composers, standard composers in that book, along with some newly composed pieces. So those were written because we needed a certain type of piece. Like for Whirling Snowflake Waltz, we were working on waltz bass along at the same time. So we needed a waltz. Sounds better if it's in minor. So, and it was snowing at the time. So all those things combined to start the process on that piece. And usually when I'm writing a piece, I start with the pedagogical need that we have, like a waltz-based piece, and then try to make the most beautiful melody I can, and then find ways to make it feel really good in your hands and sound really good so that it'll be appealing to students.
Very cool. Well, that certainly shows through in your compositions. So one of the pitfalls that students seem to encounter frequently is starting a lot of compositions, but kind of feeling stuck and not being able to finish them, or really having trouble getting past that blank page and getting started. What are some strategies that you use to overcome those two challenges?
Well, like when I was writing Whirling Snowflake Waltz while the snow was going on outside, because I live in Connecticut, I sat there for several hours trying every conceivable different melody I could think of until I found exactly the right one. And then I'd play it over and over again. Like, do I want this one? Do I want that one? Do I want this one? Back and forth. But eventually you have to come to the point where you just make a decision and write something down and then move on to the next step and know that you can always come back later. Because sometimes I'll write a composition and then a week or two later, I'll come back to it and be like, oh, I don't like it that way at all. Like now I'm going to change it. So having things sit for a while can bring up new ideas. When my students are younger, like 7 or 8, and they come in with these little tiny ideas, I just say, that's great, because they don't necessarily want to compose a whole piece. They just want me to hear their ideas. But then when they do want to put it together in a whole piece, sometimes they have a hard time remembering what they just played. So I'll just take a little video and send it to them. So when they go home and want to work on it more, they can remember the ideas that they had. So that's been really helpful with helping them compose.
That's a great tip. I love that. That's very cool.
Also, another thing I wanted to say about kids composing, I don't make them notate it because that often will kill the joy when their reading level is not up to their composing level, because often they can play things that are much more complicated than they could ever write down. So either I'll write it down for them so they can see how it looks on the music, or I just take a recording of it, because I don't want to stifle them to only be able to compose what they can read if that's very limited at the beginning. So then as they get older and they know their theory more, then it's really helpful for them to write it down for sure. But it does take a lot of help from me.
That makes perfect sense. The question I usually ask people is, how did you connect with your publishers? But I don't think that's exactly how it worked for you, because you actually became the publisher. Can you talk to us a little bit about the growth and the journey of creating Piano Safari as a company, and about beginning to expand past just what you and Catherine had initially started with a method book?
Sure. We had no intention of starting a business. When we first started it, we wrote Piano Safari for our own students. We had taught all sorts of different methods, so we could see what we liked and what we didn't, and how things could be improved. And building on the people from the past of the work that they did, and so we wrote it basically for our students. And then other teachers found out about it, and it started to grow like that. And so then we found a printer, and we were sending like a book out every 3 months or something. And then it grew and grew. So we've had to learn as we go along with a lot of the business things. And we juggle a lot of different plates on what we're in charge of and what we do. But we really like self-publishing because it gives us the flexibility to do what we want and full artistic control over it. So it's been a very interesting journey because I never, took any business classes in school. And maybe I should have, but it never crossed my mind that I'd be starting a business. But we're very happy to do it now. And we have some composers like Chiwa Tan, we publish her music. So select composers will publish their music as well.
Excellent. I had the privilege of interviewing Chiwa a few weeks ago, and she's just a wonderfully brilliant person, and it was just such a joy to speak with her. So what advice do you have for young aspiring composers, for young aspiring pianists, for people who are hoping to emulate some of your successes with the Piano Safari library?
Well, I would say to students who like to compose to not worry that whether it's going to turn into a whole piece or not. You can be like Beethoven and write down little ideas that you have. He carried around a sketchbook with him where he'd write his ideas, or take little videos of yourself if you find a good idea so you can remember it. And then maybe eventually those will turn into pieces. But you don't have to really make every single thing be an entire piece. Also, it's really, really helpful to listen to as much music as possible of different styles, because that's where you get the ideas. The more you listen to, the more you'll understand how the music's composed and then be able to make your own music in the same way.
That is awesome advice. I love every part of that. What great advice for students. So throughout the course of our conversation, you've mentioned that you do multiple things. You mentioned doing some accompanying, you mentioned teaching, writing, running Piano Safari. You wear a lot of hats.
I do.
How do you feel about having this multifaceted career? Is this a positive thing that you feel like I get to do all these different things, or do you wish that you could just focus on one thing in life?
Oh, I like having lots of different things. And I think musicians have to have a lot of different jobs. And so I like the variety. I really like my time, like editing and publishing and writing new music and putting it in Finale. I just love putting things in Finale. But in general, I like the variety. And I can't imagine not having my students. Like, they really inspire me, my young ones. So I really get ideas from them and love watching how they think about music.
What do you hope to be known for?
That I'm a really kind and encouraging teacher. Catherine and I really try to make learning piano a joyful experience through our books so that they can play beautiful music and every student can feel like, I'm good at piano, I can do this, because the method is structured in a way that will guide them from the beginning levels up through the advanced levels. And I often see this, I think it's because of the rote pieces and the way we train the students technically. They are fearless at the piano. And so often the littlest ones in the beginning of lessons will come in and say, I'm so good at this piece, or I'm really good at piano. And that's exactly what I want them to hear at the beginning, so that they really feel like they're a pianist and they can do this and they're really confident.
Oh, I love that. What a great thing to be known for. Mm-hmm. What a great way to spend your time encouraging young musicians and helping to grow the next generation of musicians and music lovers.
Yes.
That is really cool. Talk to me, give me, as a teacher who is new to the world of digitally available music, give me some strategies. I want to make sure that I'm playing by the rules. And if I purchase a single license, I use it only one time. Mm-hmm. But as I'm getting more and more and more of these pieces that I've purchased legally and downloaded, I'm finding that I'm having trouble keeping track of, have I used that one already with this student, or have I not used that license that I purchased? Do you have any strategies for teachers to make sure that they are only using the number of licenses that they've purchased?
Yeah, I think just keeping a spreadsheet or a chart would be the best way if you have a lot of students and you like to use the same music with them, so you can keep track. I've used some downloads like that too, and or I can just write their name on the top of it, or make sure I purchase one copy for my own reference library, and then the other one always goes out the door with them, so that I'm never wondering whose piece it is.
That's great advice. So far, my strategy has been that as I purchase these pieces digitally, I print one copy, and I feel like I have that one physical copy so that I'm back to basically using physical copies of music. That way, I am only distributing the one copy of the piece that I legally purchased from you. And I think it's really important that teachers respect that, because in order to continue to have a flow of music from great composers like you and the other Piano Safari composers, we all need to pay for the music that we use, because that's part of your livelihood. And I think it's really important that teachers respect that.
Yes, I agree. It takes a lot to compose a piece and then put it out into the world, hours and hours of work. So definitely I agree.
And music is not free, and web development and hosting is not free, and graphic design is not free, and it's also your time. So it's a lot of things that go into this that I think sometimes we as piano teachers don't always think about and come to realize. It's a big and complicated process. It's expensive to produce one of these pieces of music. Right. And there's a lot of value in it. And it is something that we should all be working to support, not only as an organization as the National Federation of Music Clubs, but also as piano teachers. I feel it's also really important that we help educate our students so they understand that music has value, and it is something that's worth paying for, and it's an important commodity, just like buying a pair of socks or a bunch of bananas. You wouldn't pay for one pair of socks and walk out of the store with 12. You need to make sure you're paying for what you use. I think it's really important. And this is a moment where we have to do some education.
Right, because if we composers and publishers are getting paid, then that inspires everyone to write more music too.
My special guest today has been music educator and Piano Safari co-author, Dr. Julie Hague. Thank you so much for taking time today, for sharing your insights and all of your wisdom. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.